We are at the hub here in Tokyo,
Yes.
and I am with my good friend Lawrence. He is non-American Jet. So today I have a series of questions that we're gonna go over, and we'll get his opinion on what it's like to be a non-American ALT in Japan.
Yeah.
So
Hopefully it's useful information.
yeah. So first of all, where are you from?
I'm from London in the UK.
Okay, so London from the UK, so I hope this will be helpful to all future UK applicants, and let's hope that it goes over well.
Yes.
All right, so, okay, so next question. Do you have a teaching background?
Kind of. Before I came to Japan, my job was I was a teaching assistant, but it wasn't in a school. It was in what we called a college. It wasn't like university. It was like a college for young adults that had learning difficulties. So it was a curriculum that wasn't necessarily what most people had. So it was like people with learning difficulties and what have you. So yeah, that was like the experience I had before I came to Japan.
All right, that's cool. So big question, why Japan?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. But like when I was younger, so I was always interested in things that I didn't necessarily know at the time was linked to Japan. It was things like Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, video games. You know, they were just things that I were interested in. And then as I got older, I realized those things were from Japan. But also, on a side note, being from London, it's like, you know, a very historic city, right? But I was always interested in like really sort of futuristic cities like New York and Tokyo. So that combined with the video games as I got older led to me being sort of more interested in the cultural aspect of Japan. And then I wanted to get into teaching, and it was just a perfect mix to just be an ALT in Japan kind of thing.
All right, that's a pretty solid answer. All right, I have these questions written down, but I have to keep going to my phone. So let me see if I can get this without having to look it up. All right, since you're Jet from the UK,
Yes.
can you give us the insight to what the application process is like?
Right, okay, so I don't know what it's like in the rest of the world, so like please tell me if it's the same.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I'm
in
sure
America?
it's different.
Right, okay, so initially the first thing you do after researching it obviously is make the application pack, which is a real challenge in itself because yeah, it involves like 4 copies of everything, and it involves I think like the application form.
Okay.
I'm just trying to remember this off the top of my head. Like references. What else did it? Just a bunch of applications and different things, statements. There's 2 like interview like written questions they ask you, which is almost like an essay in itself.
Okay.
And they're very particular about the format of the application. And they say, if you mess any of this up, we're just going to put your application aside. So
They mean it, by the way.
they do mean it as well. And there's lots of people, this is just like a little side thing that I've always wondered, is that these people that seem perfectly qualified for JET, more so than a lot of people, they like have a background in Japanese, they have a background in teaching. I always wonder is the reason, and then they're always baffled as to why they didn't get onto JET. And I always wonder, did they just not really listen to what they said in the sense of like, hey, we mean it. If you don't put the paperclip in the left corner and this copy first and second, you know, they will just throw it aside. So anyone watching this, make sure that you do that.
It's actually bringing back horror stories for me as well.
Oh, really?
This is pretty much similar process.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like that the beginning application process is the same.
Yeah, so after that, basically, it's a waiting game. You hand that in, and then you wait for a response, and I can't remember how long that actually took. I can't remember if it was like, I don't think it was very long.
Okay.
Maybe like a couple months at most. But after that, you get told if you have an interview.
Okay.
And I remember then being less time between that notification and the interview. And then at the interview, I can't remember if we had to bring anything, but I did my research online and I knew they would do a grammar test at the beginning, and it was individual interviews.
All right.
So we go to the embassy in London. Also in the UK, it's London or Edinburgh in Scotland, depending on which one's closest to you. You can choose between the two.
Okay, that makes sense.
I went to London since I lived in London, and I turned up, went to the embassy. There was about 2 other people waiting with me. Someone comes and collects you. They take you watch like a short video about jet, and it's like 2 people that are past jets that take you around, and then they take you to do the grammar test. It's like 5 minutes.
Okay.
And I remember just being stumped by the questions, but obviously I must have done well. I'm here, so.
All right. So yeah. So in the American test, there's no grammar portion.
Oh, really?
So when you say that, I'll be completely honest with you. Until I came to Japan, I really had no clue how our grammar patterns worked in English.
Yeah.
So if I had to go into that interview having to take a grammar test, I really question whether or not I'd be sitting here right now.
It's really daunting and scary because, you know, it's like, unless you study English, you kind of forget all the grammar that you learn in like secondary school, high school, you know, that kind of thing. So you just kind of completely forget about that. Yeah. So you're like, oh, what if they ask, like, I remember having to re-look up, like, simple things, like what's a verb, you know, just to make sure I knew, just to confirm that, you know. And yeah, it's only 5 minutes, which is weird, and it's like one piece of paper, and it's like circle the correct meaning of this word, or describe the meaning of this word, or like circle the correct spelling, that kind of thing.
All right.
So I think most of it was like multiple choice.
Okay.
And you can just kind of go through it, and I remember the options being relatively easy.
All right.
But like I wasn't sure how well I did afterwards, but like I don't know how much that actually matters anyway. So after that, we then wait for our interview. But the way we sit is like in front of each other, and there's 2 doors. One door to the right and one door to the left, and we had to sit outside the doors, and there was like 3 seats in a row, so they weren't next to each other. They were like in front of each other, and there was a sign that said, "Do not look behind you or to the left or right." So you have to kind of sit like this, and there was someone in front of you. And I don't know if it was just to try and like rattle you or like get you in a weird place, but that part was kind of scary. But then someone called you into the interview, standard interview, and then that was the process. Then you wait for your response.
All right. But that sounds really intense.
Right.
Oh my god, it sounds so much scarier than my experience.
Oh really? It was kind of daunting. It was a tough interview, but like afterwards it wasn't as scary as I thought it would be, and it was okay. You know, just don't. Yeah, you know, it was okay.
Okay.
I don't want to make it sound too scary to anyone. Like
No. Don't be put off by any of this. If you want to come to Japan, you know, jet is a great way to get here. And if you get past the interview, come here, and you'll know you've got a leg up on everyone else. But helping to get that leg up, follow-up question to the interview.
Right.
Do you remember any interview questions that you had?
Yes, I do. I remember ones that were just like, so like no question was difficult. So like what they were asking me was very straightforward, you know, but some things were very specific. So for example, in the interview it was a British ex-jet and a Japanese person.
Okay.
And one of the questions was, say you have a school festival and the school want you to have a stall representing British culture, what would you do to like show off British culture? So that was like one question. Another one was like, what's your hobby?
Alright.
And I said I like photography, and then they asked me like, how would you apply your hobby to being in Japan and like towards your job and things like that. So yeah, I remember those. And towards the end of the interview, I remember some really weird questions that they asked me. For example, I was asked, name the 4 islands of Japan, which I knew.
Alright, good.
Who's the Prime Minister of Japan?
Wow.
And Another one which kind of stumped me was, how many islands does Japan have?
Okay.
And I was like, hundreds and hundreds. I was like, it's just a lot. I didn't know specifically, but then I think afterwards when I looked, it was like thousands. So like, I don't know how that answer came across.
Well, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds. That's pretty vague, I think.
It is pretty vague. I was like, a lot. I didn't know specifically at the time, so.
All right, cool. So, so you'll have a wide variety of questions, and
Yes,
just
definitely.
take a moment to think about them. Don't say I don't know. Don't say pass. Don't say I give up. Just take a moment to think about it. They'll give you that moment.
Yeah, definitely. Always take a second to think about what you want to say. Even if you pause for like a couple seconds in an interview, I think that's fine.
All right. Okay. So, what expectations did you have prior to your arrival about JET and teaching in public school systems?
Right, okay. So I expected the public school system to have a better understanding of how to use ALTs. I expected there to be a set format, basically, of how an ALT is used. And when I came here, it's not necessarily like that.
Right. Yeah. There's the old JET mantra that says ESID.
Yes.
Every situation is different. Claire is trying to really remove that saying, but even after a lot of years of them trying to do so, it's still, heavily used.
Claire is a person, by the way.
Oh, right, yeah. Claire is not a person. Right. I believe it's financed by MEX, the Ministry of Education. But whatever it is, I'll look up the information, get a positive idea on what it actually is, and provide it in the links in the boxes below, so you can read more about it. All right, so
yeah, I expect
using
that.
ALTs.
Yeah.
Japan sucks at it.
It's true. There's no set rule on how an ALT should be used. So every Japanese teacher of English will use you differently to even other teachers in that school. Everyone has their own way, and some use you well, some not so much.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to blanket statement all JTEs.
No.
I'm not trying to blanket statement all of Japan. But the vast majority of schools are usually at a loss on what to do with their ALT.
Yes.
And it's not through any fault of their own. It's just kind of how the system's worked out.
Yeah, and that doesn't dampen the job, really. It's still a great job, but it can lead to a couple of awkward situations where you're not sure of what is expected of you sometimes. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, for sure, definitely. All right. So pretty basic question. Is this your first time in Japan?
It actually is, yeah. So I always wanted to come to Japan, but I hadn't been here until I became an English teacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
which is quite rare, actually. Everyone I speak to, they're like, I came here and I spent a couple of weeks here before, so.
Yeah, that does seem to be the trend. All right. Well, all right. So earlier, when you said when I asked you why Japan, you were talking about like Pokemon and all the Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
So since this is your first time, any ideas of what Japan might be like when you first landed and got in?
I had some expectations, but I did, for years, I've always watched Japan-related, videos on YouTube, and I've read books, and I was always interested in Japan to the point where I did my research. So what I expected was what I kind of expected it to be how it was. So nothing that surprised me too much. Nothing was not what I expected, really.
All right. Okay.
The English level I think was a bit lower than what I was expecting. I knew it would be bad, but it was worse than I was even expecting. So.
Okay. All right. That's I think a fair enough assessment. Okay. Right. So in the same vein,
yes.
What reservations did you have about working in Japan and living in Japan?
Reservations,
what doubts?
One doubt I had was how it would impact my future in general. Say if I wasn't sure necessarily before I came what I wanted to do after JET, so I wondered how it would impact my career like after Jet. So I was always worried, like, what if I spend 2 years in Japan and then I come back and that doesn't look good to employers if I don't do another teaching job?
Right.
So that was kind of a reservation I had. Like, how would it impact my working career after Jet?
All right. Okay. All right. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, okay. This is the fun question that I think everyone likes to answer.
Okay.
What is something you like about Japan and something you dislike about Japan?
Right. Okay. It's kind of like a broad answer, but like I'll try and go into more detail. But like I really like just the comfortableness, if that's even a word, of like living in Japan. Like it's just very comfortable. Like Japan, aside from how hard they work, to the point, hard work is always good, but to the point where they really burn themselves out sometimes. That aside, I can't really knock the lifestyle in Japan, like everything is really laid out for you and easy, and I just love the lifestyle in Japan. Everything's easy, It's a very easy country to live in.
It is very easy to live in.
Yeah.
All right, how about something you dislike?
Right. I dislike the lack of open communication within Japanese culture.
Okay.
So, the reservedness of Japanese culture, maybe. Yeah, and not something else a bit more specific. I hate the stares I get as a foreigner in Japan. Sometimes I don't care, but other times you kind of just want to be able to just melt into your surroundings,
Right, yeah.
noticed. But then you get someone move, you'll be on a packed train and no one wants to sit next to you, and people are like side glancing at you, and sometimes that can get a bit tiring. But
All right,
it's not no big deal. But sometimes it's just like, oh, I don't want. You're just not up for it, sometimes.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Okay. Maybe this is one of my favorite questions on here.
Oh wow. Okay.
Have you had any confrontations with any other teachers? ALT, JTE, non-English related teacher?
Right. Okay. So like, I've had my arguments with maybe other ALTs, but that's just part of life and nothing specific. But I did have a bit of an issue with a JTE once. So during sort of speech contest time, which is where we prepare for the students to do a speech contest around about August, isn't it? And I work at 2 junior high schools.
Okay.
So I was helping out at 2 different schools. The other ALTs in my town said that their students were way ahead of my students. So I made a passing comment to my JTE being like, oh, the other schools that would be partaking in the competition, they're like way ahead of us right now. We should really like get at it and try our best, And it was really like not I was really careful with how I said it. And anyway, I didn't sense that comment went down bad. But when the speech contest was happening, my vice principal said to me, "Hey, did you get the letter?" And I was like, "What letter?" And anyways, I got a letter from my BOE when I went there saying, "Please don't put down your students. Please don't knock their efforts." And like, I was just really stumped because I was like, "There's no way I did that,"
Yeah.
But maybe it was like a communication thing, language barrier issue, because I didn't suggest that, I didn't say that, but like that's how it was received, that I was knocking the students' efforts, and I was kind of like a bit sad about that, and it was a bit awkward with my JTE afterwards. So yeah, that was one situation.
Yeah. I actually had a situation recently. Actually, it's a video on my channel. You can go check that out. But basically, yeah, I took a photo at work, and like we had so much water on the floor, and they had laid down the newspapers like they were potty training a dog.
Students were even in the picture or anything.
Which
is a no-go, really. Fair enough.
So no students, no, you can't have their artwork or their homework or nothing with students. But this had no students, but it was inside the school,
Right.
and there was newspapers laid down. And it reminded me of potty training a puppy.
Right.
So I was like, oh, we're potty.
I remember you saying that.
I caught so much shit for that.
How did they see it?
I have a couple of people on my Facebook.
Right, lesson, folks. Don't add work colleagues on Facebook if you are a very vocal person.
Yeah. The problem is the woman who made the complaints doesn't speak English at all.
Right.
So she's complaining about something written in English that she doesn't understand the cultural context behind.
Seems to be the way.
And it was a nightmare. Go check out my video. You'll see for yourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's getting loud in here, so maybe we'll have to move through these videos pretty quickly. Through questions, I mean. But all right. So let me see. Where are we here? All right. What challenges have you faced being a non-American ALT in the classroom?
Right, okay, so in the classroom, I teach in Chiba Prefecture, and the majority, like vast majority of ALTs here via the JET program are American. It's like over 90 something percent, like it's a really, really high percentage. So naturally, they teach American English, which is totally okay. I understand that, and I do my best to teach American English. But being British, my pronunciation isn't the American pronunciation. So they will ask me sometimes to pronounce something in an American way. For example, words like water. Americans say water. I say water. They sound like completely different words.
They do.
And I don't feel comfortable doing that, and I kind of tell them no. I kind of say I don't want to do that. I don't want to put on an accent to sound like a different culture. Like I now use so many American English terms, which I agree I should do, and I do it because they're learning American English. So I do that, but like changing my accent, I'm like, I think that's a step too far, So,
yeah, I agree. It is.
So what I usually do is I take the time to say it in my accent and then just do a little 20 seconds of sort of cultural explanation to the students. So I'm from the UK. We say this pronunciation, but American English is this pronunciation. So I usually just say both is okay, And then the JT usually likes that because you kind of link it to culture and it makes it a little interesting. And I've sort of after 2.5 years, I've learned how to work around that one.
Right. All right. So speaking of trying not to get rid of your accent, putting your foot down, has your school or your JT's been good about letting you teach about British culture?
Yes, they have been actually. They always ask me to teach about any British holidays coming up or anything of relevance. For example, today is like April 23rd. A couple of days ago it was the Queen's birthday.
Right.
So just as a small little comment, as I did the morning greeting, I said, I just said to the students for like 20 seconds, today is a special day in the UK. And it's just everyone's interested, and the teacher reminds me specifically, hey, say that in the next class, that was really good.
Right. Okay.
So, and also I have an English board.
All right.
Where I can put stuff on, and recently my teachers asked me, can you make something about British holidays? Which there aren't many interesting ones. But to link to the previous question, they do ask me sometimes to teach about American holidays. Halloween, for example, is American, but I can teach about that because we still kind of do things for that in the UK. But they'll say to me, can you teach the students about Thanksgiving? And I'm like, no, I can't. I have no idea about Thanksgiving. I'm not the Japanese teacher would be able to teach that just as well as me. We're both clueless on that subject. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. All right, excluding your friends and family, of missing things, you'll write your friends and family.
Yes.
What is some random commodity, some random condiment, or just something from back home that you really miss about having in Japan? And where you can find it if you know where to find it.
Right, okay, so I really miss British bacon. I think it's the best bacon in the world. Everyone will disagree because American like American bacon, Canadians like Canadian bacon, but I really miss British bacon, and you cannot find it in Japan. I am a fan of baked beans and Marmite and you can actually find those in Japan. You can get them in Tokyo, and I don't know about other big cities in Japan, probably most likely, because there's like foreign food stores.
Right, yeah.
I think things are way more easier to find now than say like 10 years ago, which a lot of information online is still being passed from like 10 years ago, like, oh, you'll never find this in Japan. You probably, anything really you can probably find now, apart from like specific fresh meats and things like that. You can even find good cheese in Japan if you look for it, you know, so. Okay.
What kind of people should apply to JET and what kind of people should not apply to JET?
Right. I think people should apply for JET. If you're just interested in the JET program, I think go for it. I don't think anyone should be discouraged. I think if you want to experience something very different from home and you don't mind you like children, then definitely come to Japan. You know, if you don't get homesick very often, then come to Japan. The people that I feel shouldn't do JET are people that don't like kids. Don't come to Japan just because you love Japan and you don't like teaching. It needs to be both, you know, to really do well here, because your job is going to be teaching English. So if you don't like teaching, I've met some people who have come here on the JET program and they just want to be in Japan. They don't really care about the teaching part. And it doesn't really work out for them because they're probably placed somewhere where they don't have a very exciting life Monday to Friday. And it doesn't work out for them because they're just bored all the time. So make sure you like teaching, make sure you like children, make sure you like being in a different country, and make sure you like Japan, you know? It's relatively simple.
All right. And last two questions. The first one is, any final advice to your fellow countrymen and country women?
Specifically women?
Or men.
Or men.
Just, I'm trying to be, you know, that whole PC. So countrymen, country women.
Oh, right, okay. I thought you meant like specifically what should, okay. Basically, just, you know, go for it. You will be mistaken for an American a lot. You will lose part of your accent. I don't know if in my video people could like tell. I've been here for like nearly 3 years now, and you have such a mix. You'll have such a mix of friends that you kind of end up speaking in like an ALT language, which is like a mix of all countries. But yeah, I nothing specific really. You know, just come here and enjoy yourself. Be prepared to be placed in somewhere that's maybe rural. Be open to that idea because it could happen, and I don't know, just go for it, you know.
And is there any way people can follow you on Instagram or Twitter? Do you have an account that you want to tell people about?
I have an Instagram which is private, but like I pretty much add everyone anyway, which is at DOA_Nux, KNUX, and I post a lot of Japan-related things on there. But aside from that, nothing particularly.
Okay, so that's it. This is the first ALT interview. I hope you enjoy this, and I'm sorry about the background noise. I'll do my best to edit that out and post during production. But yeah, so thanks for doing this.
No problem, and I'll try and like keep track of the videos. So if anyone wants to like make a comment about something, I'll try and keep track of it and reply to any queries or questions that could be of any use to anyone. So.
All right, so that's it for this interview. We'll see you next time, guys.
Peace.